Good morning and welcome to another coffee tasting. I'm your host, Irish, and today we are tasting another locally roasted coffee here in Palm Springs by the Vagabond Roasting Company. Super cool, you guys. I got to meet the gentleman who roasts these coffee in Palm Springs over at the Gucci Art Scene downtown Palm Springs. Really cool vibes, you guys. This gentleman, he sells cold brew and his own roasted coffee out of his van. And it is a 1981 Volkswagen. Very, very cool, you guys. If you guys are joining me for the first time, welcome to the coffee tasting. For the coffee tastings, we like to brew our coffee three different ways. That way, we get to explore the different flavor notes of the coffee, but the different brewing methods. So for those of you guys joining me the first time, welcome. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button down below. And those of you guys who are returning, if you haven't had the chance to hit that like and subscribe button down below, please do so. That really helps me build and make this channel that much better and provide more content for you guys. Thank you so much. So let's go ahead and get this coffee started. So with this coffee that we have, that's a local roasted coffee, is a Guatemala, and it is from the Coban region of Guatemala. And with this one, this coffee is grown by the gentleman Arturo Gelbke. And so with this gentleman, he actually grew up in the Guatemala Coban region. And when he grew up, he actually moved to Guatemala City. So we're going to elaborate a little bit on the story of Arturo Gelpe after we taste our coffee. So with this coffee, we are getting notes of lavender, vanilla, and a milk chocolate finish. And based off of the look profile of this coffee, I would say it's a blonde because we get that really light roasted color. So this one's going to be really good. We're going to get a really lot of floral highlights from that lavender and vanilla. And we're going to get a subtle milk chocolate finish. So the reason why we like to brew our coffee multiple different ways on this channel is so that we can get the different flavor notes from the same cup of coffee but from different brew methods. And that's important because discovering the different flavors you get from the different brew methods is vital to making sure that you are discovering the coffee that you like in the preferred brew method that you like. Because different coffees have different brew methods depending on the style that it's brewed in. It's going to bring out different flavor notes, more of those bright citrusy, more of those bright floral flavors, or more of those bitter flavors of that milk chocolate, because we're getting more sediments in different brew methods. So exploring different coffee and exploring the different brew methods that are available to you is very important just so that you can make sure you're getting the coffee the way that you like it and the flavor profile that you like as well. And then making sure that you brew it properly in that brew method is important as well to making sure that we're getting the flavor notes that is intended by the farmers. So that's how we pay tribute to the farmers and the people who put a lot of work into this coffee, is by making sure that we properly brew our coffee, making sure we get the proper amount of grinds, the proper grind setting and proportion of water, and making sure that our coffee is always fresh, keeping it sealed, grinding it when you need it ground and not having the entire bag ground, just making sure that we keep that flavor of the coffee whole and fresh. And so this is a way that we can have an exceptional cup of coffee for ourselves, but then also at the same time pay tribute to the people who put hard work into growing this coffee, because a lot of work does go into growing coffee. So with this coffee, I'm actually really excited to taste, you guys, because I do love a good Latin American coffee and I do love a good blonde roast. And so with this coffee, it is a blonde roast and we're getting lavender and vanilla notes, and then we're getting milk chocolate mouthfeel afterwards. And so with this one, we're going to have a little bit more of a brighter cup than we're normally used to with a Latin American cup of coffee, but I still think it's going to be really, really good. So I mentioned this on all my live streams, you guys. Brewing our coffee and making sure that we properly brew our pour overs is very important to make sure that we get that perfect flavor of the coffee. So when you initially start your brew, you want to pour a little bit of water on top, uh, completely submerging all the grinds, kind of get like an even pour, and you want it to let it bloom. And when you let it bloom, the air is rising to the surface of the grinds. Um, and what that allows the water to pour a little bit more freely, because if you pour all your water too quickly and all at once, what happens is that air, instead of rising to the top, it gets pushed to the bottom, creating a barrier, slowing down the brew process, and we're over brewing our coffee, making it bitter than it should be. And so that's going to impact the flavor notes. So that's why it's important to make sure that we brew our coffee right, allowing it to bloom so that we don't slow down the brewing process. And so you know if your coffee brewed properly if your pour over takes around 2.5 minutes for a 16-ounce cup of coffee to 3 minutes for a 20-ounce cup of coffee. But on here we're doing a 16-ounce cup of coffee, so it should take roughly about 2.5 minutes. Um, so yeah, that is the one way that you can make sure that you are getting the proper brew. And then also at the same time, you want to make sure you get the grind correctly too, because the amount of grinds and the coarseness or the fineness of the grind can impact the amount of air trapped in between the grinds itself and impact your bloom. So you want to make sure that you really get the proper grind setting as well, along with the water and your brew method. Perfect. Okay. So I can actually tell you right now that my pour over is actually not brewed right because something happened with our bloom and we've got a little bit of a blockage. The water isn't pouring through at all. So we're going to skip the pour over today because we got something going on there. So that's why it's important to make sure that you brew your coffee correctly. Is because something like that can happen where we have an improper brew and right now the water isn't even pouring through, so we've got some kind of maybe air pocket or maybe some grind spilled over. So we're just going to set that off to the side. We're going to just taste the Chemex and the French press today. So with the different flavor profiles of the different coffees, we're going to get a little bit more intense flavors depending on the brew method. So with the pour over, we're going to get a lot more of those lavender and vanilla notes because those are those bright notes in the cup of coffee. And we're going to get less of that milk chocolate wash. With the Chemex, we're going to get less of those bright flavors and we're going to see more of that milk chocolate wash come forward, making it a more balanced cup of coffee. With the French press is going to be very similar to the Chemex, but it's going to have more intense flavors. So we're going to have a balanced cup of coffee, but it's going to be very flavorful. We're going to see those intense vanilla, lavender, bright notes alongside that milk chocolate finish. So we're going to go ahead and try the Chemex first. So the Chemex is a triple paper filter. So we're filtering out more of those oils and a lot more of those sediments. And that's what dies down the flavor. So we're getting the same amount of caffeine. It's just the flavor profile is going to be different. So as I smell the coffee on the Chemex, immediately what I'm getting is that vanilla sweetness with that milk chocolate finish. And then I've got a slight floral aroma from that lavender. Ooh, that's good. Okay, so we're initially getting hit with that bright vanilla sweetness with the floral flavors. We've got some strong floral flavors going on right now, very complex. But then we've got like a nice smooth milk chocolate finish. This is a really, really good cup of coffee, you guys. It's got like a really nice bright vanilla punch at the very beginning. Then we've got like a nice little lavender wash. We get that floral flavors after we get that vanilla punch. And then as the floral flavors wash away, we start to get that milk chocolate finish. This is a really, really good cup. Hats off to Vagabond. I really like this cup of coffee. Definitely worth it. So now we're going to try the French press. With the French press, we're getting more sediments and more oils, giving us a more intense, flavorful cup of coffee. So immediately right off the bat, when I smell this coffee, I'm definitely getting a lot more of those milk chocolate notes, and then a lot more of those lavender notes. The vanilla notes isn't nearly as predominant as it is on the Chemex. Oh yeah, so with this cup of coffee on the French press, we're definitely getting some strong floral lavender flavors. The vanilla sweetness isn't as sweet as it is on the Chemex because the Chemex we are getting those lighter notes. They're not as intense, making them seem a little bit sweeter. So it makes those vanilla notes really taste sweeter, and then we get those lavender followed up by that milk chocolate bitter finish. With this one, we're just getting straight lavender floral right off the bat. We do get a little bit of that bright citrus vanilla flavor, but it's mainly that floral lavender flavor. And then as it washes away, we're left with a milk chocolate mouthfeel. And that is a really good cup of coffee. Very intense on the French press just because we are getting heavy floral notes. It isn't a floral note that really leaves your mouth dry. We are getting like a nice subtle milk chocolate finish that washes it away, which is very, very pleasant. I tend to lean a little bit away from the floral notes in coffee. So if I were to brew this coffee on a regular basis, I would definitely choose the Chemex just because we get more of those milk chocolate notes and the vanilla comes forward a little bit more, giving it a little bit more sweet flavor. And then that lavender floral flavor isn't as intense on the Chemex as it is on the French press. So that is why I choose the Chemex over the French press, because on the Chemex the floral notes really take a back seat, allowing for the vanilla to sweeten up the cup of coffee and that milk chocolate finish to really balance it out. Really, really good. The Chemex on the Guatemala Coban. So with this particular cup of coffee, this cup of coffee comes from the region of Guatemala, Coban, and it is grown by the gentleman of Arturo Gilke. And then so he was born and raised in the Coban region of Guatemala, and this region of Guatemala is known for it being the coffee growing region. And so when Arturo grew up, he actually ended up moving to the Guatemala city of Guatemala, and he always wanted to move back to get into farming. He wanted to move back to his hometown and just dedicate his life to coffee growing. And so it wasn't until he met a German fellow who wanted to move back to Germany that is when he was able to buy land in the Coban region of Guatemala for himself. And so the gentleman who moved back to Germany, he was looking to move back home, and so he excuse me, he wanted to move back home, and so he sold his land in the Coban region of Guatemala for very cheap. And so Arturo pretty much came up on this piece of land, very fortunate for him. And then it wasn't until the 1970s. Sorry, I can barely read this, guys. So yeah, so in the 1970s is when he purchased the farm from this German gentleman and started growing coffee in the Coban region. And then he started to build his own family, and he wanted to get his sons into farming. So he would send his sons to the farms over the weekends and then during school breaks. And so he has really dedicated himself and his family into farming. And then him and his eldest son went to agricultural school to learn all about how to apply better practices to their farming and other things like that. And then it's around 4 years ago, Arturo Gelbke passed away, and to this day, the two eldest sons have dedicated their lives to continuing the passion of Arturo Gelke and their father, and growing coffee, and just really showing their passion for their family tradition and continuing to grow that tradition. So with this cup of coffee, it's really important that we learn the story of Arturo Gelke, because he passed on his legacy of coffee growing and his passion to his sons, and he's no longer with us, which is an unfortunate event and happening. But he is able to pass on his legacy and his passion to his sons, and they still grow coffee today in the Coban region of Guatemala, and they're able to share his legacy with us by continuing to grow coffee. So that's what makes this coffee so important, is because we're learning a little bit about someone who dedicated their lives to coffee and their passion for coffee and farming, and learning all about agricultural science to better their crops and their livelihoods for his family, and he passed that on to his kids, and so that his kids continue to grow coffee, and then maybe one day they'll be able to pass the farm on to their kids, creating a long-lasting family tradition of coffee growing. So super cool. Um, Unfortunately, we had to learn about someone who recently passed away, but at the same time, it's all about, passing down that legacy and sharing everyone's stories, because that's what makes this coffee so important, and all coffee so important, is learning the story of the farmers, how they got to where they are, how they began doing what they're doing, and the amount of work that goes into what they do. So very cool, you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed today's coffee tasting, where we learned a little bit about Arturo Gilque, may he rest in peace, and a little bit about his family, who now continues to run his farm, and their dedication for coffee, and just the fact that they're keeping their father's dream alive, by continuing to maintain and run the farm and supply us with exceptional coffee. So thanks again, everyone, for joining me in today's live stream. Join me this Friday as we explore another cup of coffee by Starbucks. I will see you next Tuesday as we explore another local coffee shop. Have a great day, you guys. I will see you this Friday.